I think, to me, the magic of plein air painting is in the relationship between the artist and their environment. It's not so much about the painting itself, but about being present in the moment. Just detaching from the rest of the world and truly taking in space for what it is. It gives you time to appreciate and reflect and time to breathe. It's too easy, especially in today's world, to get caught up in the bustle and forget the beauty, because it is beautiful, and painting in nature gives me the opportunity to remember that. Once you start painting outdoors, you start to see the world a little bit differently. Start noticing the nuances that you normally would overlook. And once you learn to appreciate a rock or a branch, suddenly everything is something worth admiring. And I think that's what makes it worth doing.
Hey everybody, welcome to Season 2 of Foltz Studio. We are here at the Longley Covered Bridge in scenic Vermont, and we are going to start painting this bridge scene. This is a fun one. It's kind of a mixture of architecture and landscape painting, so there's a lot to play around with, and I think it'll make a good one. So let's go ahead and get started. As always, I'm going to start with a burnt umber wash. So basically the idea is to tone the canvas so that I'm not staring at that bright white the whole time. And I'm just gonna thin out some of my burnt umber paint to a nice fluid consistency and start laying it in. And in this stage, I'm not being particularly precious about anything. I just kind of want to lay in enough color that it can be spread all around the canvas. There we go. That's probably enough to spread it around. All right, and once you get it to this stage, as long as this paint is pretty wet, I'll give it another little roundabout with some of this mineral spirits that I have here. As long as this paint is fairly wet, you should be able to push it around and cover the whole canvas with it. So that's what we'll do. Start there. There we go. And again, this is just to kind of work against that bright white canvas, keep it from being super glaring. It also helps you judge the colors that you've mixed when you put them on there. So if you're mixing colors and you put them on a bright white canvas, they're always gonna look fairly dark. But if you tone your canvas first, it's a little easier to tell if you have the right color. All right, that's probably good enough. And now I can start laying down the rest of my colors. So I'm working with a palette of burnt umber, alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, titanium white, and cadmium yellow light. Those are my main colors for every painting. Every once in a while I might pull out a different color, and if I do, I'll let you know what that is. But just know that for the basis of every painting, those 5 colors can pretty much get you anything you're looking for. Now in a scene like this, obviously there's a lot of green, so you want to make sure you have plenty of colors you can mix your green from. But you're going to use a lot of brown too, maybe more brown than anything else. So I'm going to make sure that I load up plenty of brown on my palette. All right. And because there's so much green, I'm also going to add a little bit of permanent green to my palette, just to kind of stretch how far I can use those other paints. There we go. All right, and now that we've got all the colors, I can start laying out my composition. So I usually do my sketching in the same burnt umber that I did my initial stain in. It tends to play nice with the rest of the colors, so it's good for that. I think what I want to do is have this covered bridge definitely be the main focus, but I think I want it kind of in the bottom third with plenty of area for the tree and skies around it. So I'll mark out where my little ground area is going to be. Somewhere around here. And I'll start laying in this bridge. So let's see here. We'll do the mouth of the bridge over here. And with my initial sketch, again, it's kind of like when I put the wash on. I'm not really being precious about it. All I want to know is where all of the elements of my painting are going to end up. I can worry about details when I've actually started applying the paint. But for now, just lay that in. There's a little bit more of an angle here to this roof. Lay that in like that. And we got the roof coming up. Of course, the opening. All right. It's a good idea of where our bridge is going to be. We got some nice shrubbery here. And the road that comes out. Again, in these early stages, not a lot of detail, just kind of an idea of the placement of all of my main subjects of the painting. I do like this big tree behind the bridge, so I want to make sure to give that plenty of attention and space to exist. And there's a couple little pines out here. All right. And I think this is a good start here. So that's about as much as I want to do for my sketch. Now it's time to start working in the colors. And as I go along, I'll be cleaning my brush in this Mineral Spirits down here, but I'll also be using it to thin the paint out and kind of help it spread a little better. Now, typically with scenes like this, I like to start with the sky. The sky tends to be the brightest part of the painting. And then as you work your way forward, things will get darker and darker and darker the closer they are to the viewer. So that's the direction I'll work in for this. And we'll start simple with just a little bit of blue. Now I'm not afraid to let some of this orange show through this top layer of paint. Little pops of that orange, especially against a cool color like blue, are really going to add some fun interest to what would otherwise be a pretty flat area, and just make it a little more pleasing to look at. And it might also sort of allude to some cloud cover or something like that. So we'll let that shine through. There we go. And because that is so bright, that really feels very cloudy, I'll come in with a slightly darker blue just to break some of that up. And this will give the impression of sky shining through the cloud cover. And at this point, you know, my focus in this painting is really going to be on the bridge more than anything. The sky is just sort of there to support it, so I'm not really trying to copy what I'm seeing so much as just give an impression of what might be there. Now, as I work my way forward, like I said, things are going to get darker, but they're also going to get more colorful. When things are far back in a scene, they tend to be brighter and bluer in general. So to create some sort of artificial distance between this covered bridge and those hills back there, I'm going to make them a little more blue, kind of purpley almost. And that will just help them sit back farther in the scene. If I just pull up on the brush like this, you can sort of give the implication of a bunch of trees back there. Do the same thing on the other side. Although I want these trees to feel a little bit closer, so I'm going to darken them a bit and maybe lean them just a touch towards a greenish color. These ones are some nice pines, so I want to try to get those peaks in there so that the viewer can tell right away that they're looking at pine trees. Again, these parts of the painting are not the focus, so I'm not being too precious. I really just want the viewer to have just enough information to tell that they're looking at a tree, or a group of trees, I suppose. Sitting right in front of those is a nice group of leafy trees, so switching to a slightly more green color. There we go. And that feels pretty good. Let's do the same on this other side here. Again, we got some nice leafy trees here. Okay. Now with that, most of the background area is kind of covered. None of that stuff is things that I'm really wanting the painting to focus on, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. I just want it to be there. But I do want some focus in this tree and maybe some of these trees that are framing out the sides of the painting. So now's when I can start being a little bit more deliberate with my color mixing and the details that I want to put in. And it's when I can start getting a little darker with my paint as well. I always like to lay the shadow side in first. It helps me sort of see the shape of what I'm trying to paint quicker, but it also is much easier to lay lighter colors on top of darker colors than the other way around. So I'll be starting with my shadows. And the nice thing about using these larger brushes is that they tend to leave more interesting strokes, and they can kind of imply some detail. So if I just kind of scrub it around, just that pattern sort of naturally makes it look like a bunch of random foliage, which is nice. And we'll get a little bit of a brighter green here at the top of those trees. I am trying to pay attention to the light and sort of the direction of that light. But for the most part, when you're outside, the light will be coming from above. So if you sort of lean in that direction, even if the light shifts on you a little bit, you've got something reliable. There we go. It really doesn't take much to get this to start looking like a tree. Let's get a couple of these little bushes down here too. And now we can put in a little bit more detail on that main tree right behind the bridge. This tree has just some slight hints of orange hitting the trees, or hitting the leaves at this point. And I do kind of want to lean into that. I think that could be an interesting color change, something fun to focus on in the background. So I'll be doing some highlights in green here, but I want to make sure I get some nice oranges, some autumn colors in there as well. More towards the top of the tree. And clean that brush off a little. Let's get something a little more orange. There we go. Yeah, that's looking pretty nice. I think I'll add just a little bit more of a bright orange in there as well. Just to kind of really sell that look that this tree is starting to change colors. That's nice. There we go. Okay, and I like that. I try to make sure to clean my brushes fairly regularly, just to prevent all my colors from mixing together on the brush. If you're applying paint to, your canvas when you're out painting, and you notice that all your colors kind of have like a brown dingy thing going on, it might just be that you're not cleaning your brush enough. So try to stay vigilant and stay on top of that. And let's take some of this green and lay in a few of these bushes here. Of course, the bottom side of these trees and bushes is going to be a little darker. So if I make sure to paint them in a little darker, it will add some nice depth and dimension to those areas. And you can see how that already gives the impression of a three-dimensional space that wasn't really there before. Let's do a little orange into this. Same thing up here. Okay, I like that. I think we could afford to go a little brighter on some of these greens in the light, so let's bring some of that in. Yeah, there we go. See how that kind of makes this whole shape pop a little more. There. Really, we can give the impression of some good sunlight coming in. Now, the more you kind of let your brush just dance around on the canvas when you're painting foliage, the more natural it's gonna look. So again, I'm not really trying to be precious or meticulous or specific about it. I'm just kind of letting my brush dance around and do its own thing. You'll notice the difference when I come in to paint the bridge here in a few moments. That, if I'm painting architecture or even the trunk of a tree, that might be an instance where I'll be a little more specific and careful about how I lay the paint on. And while we've got this big pile of green paint, we might as well get these bushes here in the foreground. Again, come in with my shadowy colors first. And I'll paint my highlights on top of those. There we go. It's pretty nice. The little green here. All right. And I think we can afford to go just a tad brighter on some of this. Now, typically the grass is going to be a bit brighter than your trees and your bushes and things like that. So as I add this grass in here, I'm going to be dipping into that bright green. I'll add a touch of white just to brighten it up a little bit. There we go. And I'll kind of let some of that break up into the underlying brown. It can sort of give the impression that, you know, there's a little bit of dirt showing through this grass. It's not a perfectly manicured bit of lawn, but nice wild grass. A little bit more of that bright green here. And right along that edge. Okay. Now we've got all of the basic forms in there. We can start focusing on our bridge. And again, in painting that, I want to start in the shadows. Now, the opening of the bridge has the darkest shadows in the whole scene, so I am going to push that and make sure it's darker than anything else. There we go. And if I don't get the shape of this opening quite right while I'm laying it in here, I can always come in with my lighter colors later and sort of cut in and shape that the way that I'd like it. Remember, there are very few mistakes you can make while you're painting that you can't fix, either by painting over it, or you can just wipe the paint away and repaint it. But none of it is permanent and none of it is unfixable. So just try to have fun. Now also, while I have this color, I'll do this shadow that's being cast by the roof of this structure. All right, and I actually think the peak of this roof needs to go over. We'll do that. And that same shadow kind of wraps around the side here. So I'll mark that in. All right. And again, we're working just a little bit lighter at a time. So in this shadow area of the bridge, as we sort of move towards the entrance, there's a little bit more light that's getting in there, and it's kind of got like a bluish gray tone to it. So into my dark mixture, I'll add a little bit of blue and a little bit of white. Kind of bring that closer to what I'm seeing. And I'm just gonna lay some of that color in. And we'll get a little lighter as we move towards the mouth. There we go. And notice how I'm kind of just letting these paints blend together on their own to get a nice smooth transition. And that's the opening of the bridge done. And the side of the bridge is a pretty similar color. It's a little lighter, so again, I'm mixing a little bit of blue and a little bit of white into my mixture and laying it into the shadow side of the bridge. And I'll let those colors kind of blend naturally. And finally, let's go ahead and get the front of the bridge laid in. That is the brightest part of the whole thing. So now I'm just gonna kind of warm that color up with some yellow and red and a little bit of white. And we can start getting that in as well. Now notice when I put this on, how that front of the bridge immediately feels like it's bathed in a little bit of sunlight. There we go. Almost there. And again, I'm gonna just gently blend those shadows in to the highlights. And the last few details we need are the roof and the road. Those are pretty simple. We've got a nice bluish green roof, so I've got a color mixed up for that. And we could go a bit brighter there, I think. Does tend to want to mix in to the undercolor, so you can just kind of go over that a few more times. And let's get this side of the roof in as well. Okay, that's not too shabby. One last detail, and I think we can call this finished. The road. Now the road is fairly bright compared to the rest of the painting. I will knock that brightness down just a touch. I don't want it to compete too hard with the bridge. But I do want it to be obvious that, you know, this is a road we're looking at. So I've mixed up this almost purpley kind of gray here. And we'll just very quickly knock that road in. Okay. There we go. And just like that, we have a completed painting of the bridge. Of course, there are more details I could add in here, but overall, I think this is a nice, simple, solid painting. And I had a lot of fun doing it. So thanks for sticking around, and I'll see you guys next time.